Hello everybody, you are watching Luca Robot Rallis Sharaska, and today I have something special for you. We're going to be going through a lot of the spoilers that have hit from Phyrexia All Will Be One, but before that I want to talk a bit about where I've been and what I've been doing. If you've been on hipstersofthecoast.com and seen some of the articles I've written, you might realize that the number has increased quite a bit as of late. That has taken up a good amount of my time. Additionally, the holiday season and the time before it was quite chaotic for me. However, I'm hoping that this video marks the beginning of a renewed vigor, especially in regards to my upload schedule. So with that in mind, let's just jump right into things with our first card. I'm going to be spending less than 1 minute on each of these cards, try and make these videos nice and digestible for you, but if for some reason they aren't, do not feel ashamed to put this video at 1.5 speed. Starting off with Skrelv Defectormite, I like this card a lot. I think it might see some play inside of Standard if there is a mono white deck that pops up, and possibly in some other arena-specific formats like maybe Alchemy or something, or maybe Historic if mono white seems to be a bit prevalent there, because making something unblockable from monocolored creatures, pretty cool, or rather whatever color your opponent's playing the most of, which I think a lot of the decks in Historic are primarily mono-red, so getting past those is pretty nice, although I'm not assuming there's too much blocking happening in that matchup. Either way, pretty cool card. I like that you could pay life to activate this ability. This not being able to block kind of sucks, but we're going to move on. Oh, as a special note, Skrelv is actually very good and limited, so keep that in mind. Kaya, this card is very good. The only problem with it is that it's 7 mana, so pretty much not going to see any play in Standard. It just doesn't really do enough. I feel like you really need to have a 7 mana card be something that wins you the game on the spot for it to be playable right now, especially with demons in the format like Mono Black, which, don't worry, we have plenty of cards going forward that are incredible that won't see play just because Mono Black is that good. Anyway, this card's extremely powerful, obviously a limited bomb, but I don't know if it's going to do anything in Constructed. Mirren Safe House, this card just doesn't do anything in Limited at all, and in Constructed, at least Standard, I don't think this is doing anything either. So we're going to go forward, just move on. Tyver. Tyver is a 3 mana, 3 loyalty planeswalker with some pretty interesting abilities. I don't know exactly what they're trying to get us to do with these. I hear that there's some kind of combo potential with a few different cards, but I don't think most of those cards are in Standard. We're talking other formats, and I'm not as educated on those. So Limited, I think it's just okay. And then in other formats, we'll see. Malcator Purity Overseer. Obviously a very powerful limited card. I don't think that this is going to be a card that you're going to have to worry about in Constructed for right now, but maybe it'll do something in like Commander. Otherwise it's just a, 4 power and toughness worth of creatures for 3 mana with a bunch of mostly flavor text on the bottom, because you're rarely going to get that to work in Limited. Moving on, we have Mind Splice Apparatus. This card doesn't do anything, and I'm not expecting it to do anything in any format. Mirrex. This is one of our cool new land types, Sphere. Makes colorless mana, and it has this sweet little ability here. Add 1 mana of any color, only if it enters the battlefield this turn. That's actually very relevant, and because of that I'm wondering if this is actually going to be more playable than it looks, because I would actually consider playing this inside of my Saheeli Commander deck, just because a card that comes down untapped and can immediately tap for whatever color I need is not bad, and generally, as long as I can get that initial burst of mana, it doesn't really matter that I can have extras of it next turn as bad. The other line of text is a little bit on the useless side, but I suppose it's fine in Limited. The Monumental Facade, well, honestly, I think this is definitely a Monumental Facade, because this card does not seem especially good for Constructed. Maybe it will be. It enters the battlefield with 2 oil counters. You can remove 1 to put an oil counter on something else, and you can tap it to add colorless mana. Colorless lands, they just have such a high opportunity cost. You need to have so much stuff working for you to get this card to work. And mono black in particular, I guess, would have some room for it, but there needs to be cards that you want to do things with oil counters to make this work with. And right now, I haven't seen anything that makes me think that oil counters are going to be a big standard player, and in limited, I just don't think this is worth. Rhea Ivor, Bane of Bladehold. This card's actually incredibly strong and limited, as you might imagine. 4 mana for a 3/4 with Battlecry. Pretty strong, definitely a card that you would expect to see in like a master set, but it also has other stuff. I don't think this text here, you can read it if you like, pause the video if you want, is enough to get this card into the realm of standard playability at all, but it is cute, it is interesting, and I expect that I'm going to lose to it quite a bit in limited. Monument to Perfection. This card I don't think does anything in any format. In limited, it's going to take up way too much of your time, and if you manage to get it to work, cool, but I think you're going to lose a lot of games just spinning your wheels, wasting this card, and wasting time paying 3 mana to tap it to go look for basic lands, spheres, and locuses, and playing them out. Just play better cards. And in standard, I just don't see a world where you're going to get to 9 lands in play, and then, haha, turn this into a 9/9, and your opponent's gonna die from it in 2 hits. Yeah, it's unlikely. Just seems like a lot of work. I think this card will do nothing in any format. Bloated Contaminator, on the other hand, is a card that I really want to do something. This is a 3 mana 4/4 with Trample, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player proliferate, it also has Toxic 1. That's a lot of stuff all on one card. Whether or not that's enough to break through the absolute gridlock that is current standard is beyond me, but definitely in limited, I'm expecting this card to be extraordinarily powerful. Definitely above par. Encroaching Mycosynth is a 4 mana artifact that gives all of your non-land permanents in all zones the artifact subtype, or super type rather. I don't know what this is going to do for you in limited, probably just nothing at all, but I can see that this might have some kind of obscure combo potential in other formats, probably not standard, however. Vindictive Flame Stoker is a nifty card. I don't know if it's going to be a card you're going to play in standard at all. I just don't think it does enough. It doesn't really attack too incredibly well. It definitely doesn't block incredibly well. In fact, it plays more like an enchantment than it does a creature, or an artifact than it does a creature, but for some reason it does in fact have the creature type. Vindictive Flamestoker, also what people tend to call me on Twitter. Moving on. Black Sun's Twilight, incredibly strong removal spell, and or combat trick, and or resurrection spell in limited. I don't think this card's going to do anything in standard, but maybe it pops up as like a one-of, so you can kill your opponent's shoulder it, get your own one back or something. But, I don't know. Seems like that's a bit on the expensive side. Maybe it is just enough to pay like 3 mana to kill a 2/2 or 2 toughness creature, with the upside of having that late game potential to do 2 things at once. We'll see. Well, obviously it's a bomb unlimited, by the way. Malira, Alive and Well, is a 2 mana 3/3 that only allows you to get 1 poison counter per turn. Pretty cool. And you can exile it to bring a creature back that dies this turn, which is pretty cool. It can also get artifacts too. So things like Aetherflux Reservoir, Bolas' Citadel, whatever other things you have on the field that you want to keep around. Definitely pretty interesting. I don't think it's going to do a lot in standard if I had to guess. I think maybe it's just not really doing anything for this format. But in limited, I'm expecting it to be pretty powerful. And in commander, I'm expecting it to be especially potent. Gra's Unstoppable Juggernaut. This is a big card. It 8 mana, that's a lot. It doesn't do a whole lot. It can get removed, and if you've already started attacking with your 5/3 creatures, then this thing gets removed. They are no longer 5/3s, and that will be bad for you, on average. Additionally, I don't really know what kind of deck this goes into. It's like it wants you to go wide, so all your creatures turn into 5/3s. But the best go wide decks are like Elf Ball decks, and those decks generally don't need something like Dross. They have just better things to do. And since most of the creatures you're tapping are going to be mana dorks, they're not going to be able to attack the first turn you cast this. The format that I think this will be the most playable in is limited, and I don't really think it'll be that good. I definitely don't think it's a bomber. I just think it's a powerful finisher. Kind of like, making all your creatures into 5/3s is strong, which it is, but I just don't feel like it's going to be especially great. What if you just play this on an empty board? It's just a 7/5 that absolutely has to attack every turn, which is definitely not that good. Archfiend of the Dross. This is a card that is extraordinarily powerful, but the problem is it's competing with Shouldered, which is an absolute brick wall that has immediate value pretty much as soon as you play it, and Archfiend of the Dross does not. Additionally, even though this is very hard to attack into for like mono red decks and stuff, and mono white decks I suppose, and even blue, Phyrexian Obliterator is also being printed, so it's kind of competing with both of those cards at the 4 mana slot in the mono black deck, so I don't really think this has a chance to replace either one of those. That said, in limited and maybe in maybe some other formats, I don't know, it might do something. Probably not Commander, just doesn't really do enough. But limited, it's extremely strong. Play it, definitely. Blade of Shared Souls is an interesting equipment, definitely not something I'm expecting to see in Standard, but the baseline is a 2/2 for 3 mana with this equipment attached to it, and then also if you have any other creatures, you can make this creature a copy of it, and then whatever you equip this Blade of Shared Souls to can become a copy of whatever creature you control that you want. Pretty nifty and definitely strong and limited, but not really a card that is constructed worthy. Norns Wellspring is next. This card is very bad. It looks like it's a cool build around, but do the math here. How much work do you have to do to make this card good? Well, if you don't have a whole lot of ways to proliferate for basically free, it is a baseline of 3 mana and 2 creatures dying to draw 1 card, and they're only creatures you control. If you want to draw 3 cards, you're going to be paying 5 mana, 4 cards, 6 mana, and you have to have 8 creatures die for that to happen. Just the lines of play with this thing are pretty bad, and it just doesn't really give you as much value as, Divination on average. It's a whole lot of wheel spinning, and not especially good at wheel spinning. I think it'll be probably replacement level in limited, unless it's an extraordinarily slow and grindy format. It doesn't say non-token, and maybe there's more Phyrexian Mites running around than I thought, but I'm not expecting this card to be especially good at all. Blackleaf Cliffs marks one of the cards in the cycle of ally color fastlands. Pretty cool to see those reprinted. Pretty happy about that. Admittedly, some of them were way more expensive than they needed to be, even though they've had quite a few printings in the last few years. Unfortunately for me, I will have to open a lot of these in sealed and limited, where they're actually not really that good. They're just a pretty okay upgrade over a basic, but you should probably be taking playables instead. Obviously quite good for standard to see those as well. Unctus Grand Metatect is a bit wheel spinny, but maybe this does something inside of some kind of mono blue deck in constructed formats. Either way, in limited, it also is a little bit wheel spinny as well. It's not bad, but I think you're going to have to really try hard to build a game plan around it. It's definitely a powerful card, and all. It just doesn't wear its power like an overcoat. It doesn't have any inherent protection. You do have to have blue artifact creatures. It does allow you to do that, but you do have to pay some mana into it. Geth, Thane of Contracts, a card I'm definitely not expecting to see constructed play too much, but maybe it manages to sneak its way into standard. Also pretty powerful and limited if there's a healthy amount of enter the battlefield abilities. Although it does, of course, give all of your creatures -1/-1 besides itself. Cool. It's cool. I definitely like it for Commander. I like the idea of bringing back something every turn for 3 mana. It's pretty cool. The -1/-1 is barely even a downside there. Honestly, I'm actually kind of happy about that. Don't know why we have Mr. Woods over here, but we're going to move on. Tablet of Completion. This is a 2-mana artifact, and it starts out as a bad mana rock, and then quickly turns into a okay-ish card draw spell. I don't really know what this will do for you in Limited. I guess if you start with it early, it's okay. But if you start with it late, this card is just absolutely awful. It doesn't do anything when you're behind. It doesn't do anything if you're late. It's just a really, really slow. And in constructed formats, I think this kind of has that issue compounded even harder. It doesn't really do anything if you draw it in the late game, and if you draw it in the early game, you still need to do some work on it just to get it to where it actually starts doing anything. And I think in this format especially Standard, you just need to do stuff, and you can't afford to just dawdle, and this card is dawdling if I've ever seen it. Mercurial Spelldancer, on the other hand, is a card that I'm definitely excited about. It's quite powerful. Bare minimum, you're getting a 2-mana 2/1 that can't be blocked, but there's a lot more to it than that. Cards that start out in the early game pretty good and can attack and block, and then in the late game also have utility are real nice, and this definitely has utility in the late game for sure. That being said, besides limited play, where it's guaranteed to be quite strong, I don't know what it can or will do in Standard, or Commander for that matter. Actually, I know exactly what this will do in Commander. This is going to be copying my Blatant Thieveries and Expropriates every chance I can get. Next up we have Ovika, Enigma Goliath. 7 mana, 6/6 with a lot of text stapled to it. I don't really think this is going to be a standard card, but in Limited it's obviously quite strong. The problem is that it's 7 mana. You want a 7 mana creature to be this strong, and it does do the work. Constructed formats like Commander, I think this could be pretty fun, but I'm not expecting this for, Standard or Historic or anything like that. Pioneer. Evolve Spinoderm, 4 mana, 5/5, has a bunch of text about oil counters, and when the last one gets removed, it dies. Yeah, I mean, Limited, it'll be strong. Constructed, I'm expecting mono green to not really be a thing anymore. I just don't think it is as good as mono black. I don't really think there's a reason to play mono green right now. I could be wrong. Maybe the pieces just come together and it'll be better than it is. But even with the 3 mana 4/4 and this 4 mana 5/5, I just feel like black has better options all the way down the line. Urabrask's Forge is a 3 mana artifact that I'm expecting to see its pinnacle in Limited, and not really too many other places. I don't really think this is going to do too much for you in Mono Red and Standard, but I could be wrong. Maybe it is just enough to get the job done. Moving on, we have Kemba, who is back. Kemba is a 2 mana 2/2 that has some interesting equipment synergy, but the problem is I'm not expecting that many equipments to be especially powerful in Standard, or in Limited for that matter. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. It also has a nifty ability to pump your equipped creatures, and you can even pay a lot of mana into it to create 2/2s. Pretty strong and Limited for that reason alone, because it is just a 2/2 with some extra bonus text. That is like a little army in a can going for it, but I don't think it's going to do much in Standard. However, Commander, people are always looking for things that cheat equipment costs, and this is a way to do it. This will get your Colossus Hammer equipped, or whatever it's called, on the cheap. Pretty nice. Next up we have Skrell Scythe. That's an error I've never seen before. This is an interesting little Bitter Blossom style effect, except these mites can't block, and they have Toxic 1. And it also says that you get this cool Corrupted ability, where your creatures with Toxic will have lifelink, as long as your opponent's taken some poison damage. Pretty cool. Not really sure where it fits. If there was a really good, a sort of control style deck in the format that you had a lot of turns against, I could see Skrull's Hive being at its best against that out of the sideboard, but as it stands, this is kind of missing a home. I guess Limited's the best place for it, and there I think it's probably just okay. Kethic Crucible Goliath is a 4-mana 4/4 that really wants you to play as many copies of Active Treason or similar effects as you could possibly imagine. That said, I don't think it's that good. I mean, it practically reads like an uncommon. It doesn't really have a whole lot going for it. If you don't literally do the one thing it asks you to do, you're kind of just asking for your cards to be worse by sacrificing them. So, probably steer clear of it. White Sun Zenith is 2 and X for a very interesting sorcery. They made Martial Coup better, which is pretty cool. Instead of just getting random 1/1 white soldiers that you definitely want to attack into your opponent with and win the game, instead you get these really cool mites that you can immediately hit your opponent with the next turn and toxic them to hell and back. You also do get the destroy all other creatures effect, which is pretty nifty. You also get to gain X life, and Martial Coup did not do that. Neither did White Suns, for that matter. Moving on. I guess I should talk about the formats. Limited, obviously quite strong. Commander, I'm expecting it to be pretty strong. I don't think it'll do anything in Constructed, however, besides that. The Mycosynth Gardens is a sphere land that can tap for colorless, or 1 and tap to add a mana of any color, and you can make it a copy of target non-token artifact you control with mana value X if you pay a bunch of mana into it. You know, I guess it really depends on how important your non-token artifacts are. I could see this being a card I'm not completely unwilling to play in Commander if I'd like to make another copy of, like, either Flux Reservoir or something. But for the most part, I think Mycosynth Gardens is going to be relegated to the bulk bin. Vencer Corpse Puppet is a pretty cool 2-mana 1/3 with lifelink and toxic 1. And you also get this bonus 3/3 whenever you proliferate, which will be doing the majority of your brawling when you're attacking and blocking. I think Vencer's going to be staying home most of the time and keeping back 2/1s and stuff like that, especially in Limited. In Constructed, I don't really know if there's a home for this. I guess maybe if you're going to be doing a lot of proliferating, because if you're not proliferating, this card just doesn't do anything at all. It just doesn't. Not really worth. Speaking of cards that aren't really worth, Red Sun's Twilight is a bad card. It just doesn't do anything. Commander is the only format where it is even remotely playable, and that's only because you get copies of the tokens. Otherwise, also because you'll have 3 additional players whose artifacts you might be able to destroy. I'm actually going to be putting a copy of this into one of my decks, but that's a very strange deck. On the whole, I think this card's generally quite bad, and I'm expecting to never see it in Standard and get it passed to me pretty late in Draft. Glissa Sun Slayer, just released today as a leak, is a 3-mana 3/3 with a lot of cool abilities, First Strike and Death Touch, which means it's great on attacks and great on blocks. And whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you get to choose from 3 very strong effects. I don't really know how you lose with this card in Limited. It's a must-kill, absolutely must-remove card. It just does everything in Limited. Obviously a bomb there, but I think it suffers from the lack of a home in other formats. I just don't really see a world where this is doing anything for you in Standard. Maybe it will, but I feel like it just eats removal spells. Maybe black, green rather, will be a deck that kind of pops up, or maybe mono black will start being able to make a splash here. Because there are some pretty powerful green cards in this set and throughout the last few Standard sets, but I just don't really know if it's enough to usurp the crown that mono black holds right now. Next up we have Izuri is back again, a 4-mana 3/3 with a lot of text related to proliferating. Very build-aroundy. Definitely something I'm expecting to be relatively strong and Limited if proliferate's as popular and common as it seems. And definitely not a card I'm expecting for Standard. Just does not do anything in any reasonable amount of time. Although it's cool that in the late game you can, kick it for 3 to build your own divination attached to it. That's pretty nice. The Filigree Silex is a 2-mana legendary artifact that has some pretty interesting abilities. None of them cost mana to activate, which is the first sign that this is actually approaching the realm of playability, because if any of these did cost mana, I think they'd be much worse. You could pay 0 mana and tap it to put an oil counter on it. That is the main gatekeeper. Oil counters being put on one at a time is actually quite tedious, but you are paid back a little bit with a couple of these abilities, as we're going to read. You can sacrifice it to destroy some stuff with mana value exactly equal to the number of oil counters on it, or you can remove 10 oil counters from among permanents you control and sacrifice this to deal 10 damage to any target. Now, if there is some kind of obscure dedicated oil deck, the Filigree Silex is an extraordinarily powerful and efficient finisher because it only costs 2 mana, it immediately comes down and pings something for 10, which will hopefully be your opponent's face. That's pretty cool. In Limited, I think it's going to play out like that if you have enough oil laying around, and it is just like a timer for your opponent. They can't just sit around and do nothing. Like if you have like 4 oil counters on the board, you play this, put an oil counter on it, and then proliferate, you've gone from 4 oil counters up to 7, which is pretty big. And then all you have to do is maybe proliferate once or twice more, or find a way to get a couple of extra oil counters, and all of a sudden your opponent better hope that they haven't taken any damage. Standard, not so much. I don't think this is going to do much of anything, but it's cool that it's there. Thrun, Breaker of Silence, is an absolute limited all-star. 5 mana 5/5 with trample that can't be countered, can't be the target of non-green spells or abilities that your opponents control, and it has indestructible when it's your turn, which means it's going to crash in at every possible opportunity, starting on turn 6 after it gets played, as at the earliest more than likely. Very, very strong. The hexproof is pretty powerful, well, the pseudo hexproof. Not really too many green things I'm expecting that are going to just blow this out of the water. Indestructible on your turn, obviously, also quite powerful. It doesn't need any help. It's just a bomb. Standard, however, and other constructed formats, definitely not something I'm expecting to be especially strong. And in Commander, also not really too good. Kind of anemic. I just want more out of my cards. I know that's a little cynical to say, and maybe there'll be some cool Commander decks built around it, but that's just the way my play group is right now. Zenith Chronicler. This is a 2-mana 3/1, and it has some multicolor spell hate. I think you should probably stay away from this generally in draft. Definitely don't look to pick it up early, and God forbid you have multicolor cards inside your deck that you just can't cast as long as this is on the battlefield. If you are the one playing it, it's even worse. If your opponent's playing it, yeah, it's pretty bad. Standard format and constructed otherwise, I'm not expecting this to do very much. Maybe it'll end up being a sideboard card if multicolor cards become extraordinarily popular, but I don't think they will, and I don't think most decks are looking for a card like this. This is a constructed card, and not just a constructed card, a very narrow constructed card. This is a sort of infect toxic style deck that you want to put this in. Pretty much nothing else. Can probably peck in maybe once or twice, and then from that point on it basically functions as an enchantment that just sits around and says, hey, please don't target my stuff, and if you do want to target my stuff, this has to be the first thing. In that regard, I think it'll do a fine job, but I don't think that's going to be a deck in Standard, and I don't think it's going to come together as often as you would like in Limited. I mean, how many times in a game are people targeting your stuff? And when they are targeting your stuff, it's probably going to be the stuff that's closer to killing them with poison counters anyway. Our Gentum Masticore. So, like all these Masticores, this does have discard a card attached to it somewhere, but we do have some beef for our trouble. You do have to sacrifice, by the way, unless you discard the card, at the beginning of your upkeep every single turn. It does have First Strike, it does have protection from multicolored, and that's all cool. which is good. I mean, a 5/5 with First Strike for 5 mana is definitely not bad, and some protection abilities on top are also pretty cool. But the real meat is this last ability, and I don't really know how I feel about it. I think it'll make it borderline solid in limited, but maybe not that good, and definitely not a card I'm expecting to see in standard. All things considered, I'm starting it off with a relatively low grade, and if it seems to improve from there, maybe I'll be impressed, but I'm not really impressed right now. The Seed Core is a really cool new sphere. I think this might end up taking Infect decks to a slightly higher high than they have been for the last little while. They've kind of fallen out of favor from what I hear. A cool Pendelhaven effect that gives +2/+1 to something, but also can cast your Phyrexian agents, whatever they're called. What is it called? Well, whatever the unblockable 1/1 is, as well as your Glistener Elf. Just a lot of cool stuff going on there. However, I don't expect it to do a whole lot in most formats. Maybe limited, it can turn your mites into 3/2s. That's kind of cool. This is a pretty cool red-green powerhouse. Miglaws? I'm gonna say Miglaws. This cool Maze Crusher has a lot of stuff going for it. It can attack after it comes out on turn 3. On turn 4, it will be attacking as an 8/8 if you want to pay all your mana into it, and that's a hefty chunk of damage. It, of course, doesn't have Trample, but you can give it Vigilance and Menace if you throw some mana at it as well. And, of course, it also has some Destroy Target Artifact or Enchantment synergy, or not synergy, ability built in there. That's pretty cool. I don't really know what home this has, or what deck this will fit into in pretty much any format except limited, where I think it'll definitely be a very strong card. But the power level's there. It's just missing a place to go. Needs a forever home, just like me. Dragon Wing Glider is a very powerful equipment that I'm expecting to be one of the most groan-worthy rares in the format as far as limited goes. It's extraordinarily powerful. I wouldn't say unbeatable, but it's definitely approaching it, just because you can immediately pay another 5 mana to turn one of your other creatures into another flying hasty dragon. That's very strong, obviously. I don't want to play against this, and I know I'm going to have to, especially since it's just a rare and not a mythic. I don't think it'll do a lot in standard, but I could be proven wrong. Other formats, who knows? Phyrexian Arena is a cool reprint. I don't think it's going to be doing a lot in standard, more than likely. Maybe it will find a way to fit into mono black, but without a card like, Grey Merchant of Asphodel to kind of, make use of all that extra devotion and recoup some of that life loss. It just feels like this card is asking you to do a lot of wheel spinning. And maybe that's fine in a deck that has cards like, Sholdred to gain you that life back. But Mono Red's gonna try hard to keep decks that are a little greedy with their life total in check, and this is definitely a card that's very greedy about your life total. It also has to have a full turn cycle before it even does anything. Next up we have Conduit of Worlds. Not a card I'm expecting to see play in Standard, but definitely a card I'm expecting to see in Commander, and probably in Limited as well. Of course, it's got some downsides to it. You can only cast either the spell from your graveyard or a card from some other way of being cast, like your hand or another way to cast it from a graveyard. I guess if you have 2 of these, theoretically you would only be able to cast this one. So 2 of them wouldn't do anything for you. That said, pretty cool card. It's Crucible of Worlds and Ramanov Excavator with some extra stuff built in there. Very nice. The Eternal Wanderer is a 6-mana planeswalker with 5 loyalty and a pretty cool static ability that says, single combat only please, only one creature can attack me each combat. That's pretty cool. It can blink stuff with its +1, create 2/2 samurais with double strike for a 0, And then the -4 is like a tragic arrogance style effect where it's going to wipe away all but one creature for each player. And it is sacrifice. So it doesn't matter if that creature has Shroud or Indestructible. That creature is going to leave the battlefield regardless. It does not target the creatures, and it doesn't matter if they're indestructible, they are being sacrificed. Pretty cool. I don't think it's going to be standard playable. I just think 6 mana is a whole lot. Maybe something in like Brawl and Commander, but definitely not a card I'm expecting to see play outside of those formats, and limited, where it will obviously be quite powerful. And that kind of wraps things up. There's a couple of things from the Phyrexia Commander decks, but I'm not too worried about those. Oh yeah, we have these. If you didn't know, we have some stuff for Kaito, Green Sun's Twilight, Caramonix, and a few other leaks here. I'm not going to go through all of those. You could take a look at Mythic Spoiler or some other source if you'd like. Those are a little on the old side. These are all from this month, just within the last few days. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to leave a like, possibly subscribe. That helps me out quite a bit. Maybe leave a comment. You can find my articles. The most recent 2 are about alchemy as well as historic artisan up on hipstersofthecoast.com. My article is the headliner right there. And if you click on my name in the subheader there, you can actually get to my author page, where you'll find all of my articles over the last several months. And I have quite a few of them, and even more to come. Like I said, hopefully my upload schedule will be improving now that I have a little bit more free time. Thank you so much for being patient with me. I hope that you've enjoyed this, and have yourself a wonderful new year so far.